Last week, what began as a routine drive home from work turned into one of the most stressful and ultimately eye-opening experiences of my life. It was a Tuesday evening around 7 p.m., and after a long day at the office, I was exhausted, eager to get home to the quiet comfort of my apartment. The roads were mostly clear, the hum of my tires against the pavement providing a steady rhythm as I cruised down the highway. Then, without warning, flashing red and blue lights illuminated my rearview mirror. My heart began to race. I quickly ran through a mental checklist. No speeding, my registration was up to date, no traffic lights had been ignored. Still, I pulled over to the shoulder, lowered my music, and rolled down my window. As the officer approached, I noticed his hand resting on his holster, a detail that immediately set me on edge. "License and registration," he ordered, his voice clipped and devoid of any greeting. Swallowing my unease, I reached toward the glove compartment, narrating my movements as I retrieved my documents. "Officer, may I ask what I did wrong?" "You ran a stop sign at the intersection of Maple and 5th, he replied curtly. Confusion flooded my mind. I hadn't been anywhere near Maple and 5th that day. "That can't be right," I said carefully. "I haven't been on Maple Street today." His expression remained unreadable. "Step out of the vehicle, sir." Alarm shot through me. This wasn't how these things were supposed to go. "Officer, there must be some mistake," I protested. "I wasn't anywhere near." "Step out of the vehicle now." His sharp tone left no room for argument. With my hands trembling slightly, I unbuckled my seatbelt and stepped out. Before I could fully process what was happening, I was instructed to place my hands on the hood of my car. Cold metal touched my wrists as he quickly and efficiently snapped a pair of handcuffs around them. "You're being detained while we sort this out," he said, his voice professional, detached. "This is ridiculous," I muttered, trying to keep my voice steady. "You've got the wrong person." He didn't respond. Instead, he walked me to his patrol car, reciting my rights in a monotonous tone. My mind was a whirlwind of panicked thoughts. Would this go on my record? Would I need a lawyer? How would I explain this to my boss if I missed work, because I had been arrested? At the station, the processing was swift and humiliating. Fingerprints. A mugshot. A holding cell. The fluorescent lighting buzzed faintly as I sat there, my protests falling on indifferent ears. Time stretched unbearably, but eventually, after what felt like an eternity, though in reality, it was probably only 45 minutes, a different officer appeared outside my cell. This one was older, with graying hair at his temples and deep lines etched around his eyes. There was something gentler in his demeanor. "We need to talk," he said simply. I was led to an interview room where, to my surprise, he removed my handcuffs and gestured for me to sit. "There's been a misunderstanding," he explained, his voice calm. "We've been looking for a vehicle involved in a series of traffic violations. The driver ran a stop sign earlier today and nearly caused an accident. Your car matches the description." Relief surged through me. "That wasn't me," I said firmly. "I've been at work all day. You can call my boss to confirm." He nodded. "We already did. It turns out the vehicle we're searching for is nearly identical to yours, same make and model, but the license plate differs by one digit. Officer Davis misread it in the field." I exhaled shakily, the tension that had coiled in my chest finally loosening. "So I'm free to go?" "Yes," he confirmed. "But before you do, Officer Davis would like to speak with you." My first instinct was to refuse. I was still angry, still humiliated. But something about the older officer's expression gave me pause. "Fine," I muttered. A few minutes later, the officer who had arrested me entered the room. Gone was the rigid authority figure who had handcuffed me on the side of the road. In his place stood a man who looked genuinely remorseful. "I owe you an apology," he began, sitting down across from me. "I made a mistake, and you paid the price for it. That's not acceptable, and I'm truly sorry." His sincerity caught me off guard. I had expected a perfunctory apology at best, some bureaucratic excuse about protocol. Instead, there was real regret in his voice. "I should have verified the license plate more carefully," he admitted. "And I should have listened when you tried to explain. There's no excuse for how I treated you." I didn't know what to say. Part of me still clung to my anger, but his genuine contrition was disarming. The older officer cleared his throat. "We understand if you want to file a complaint," he said evenly. "That's your right, and we'll provide you with the necessary forms." I hesitated. What happens to him if I do? As I sat in the quiet of my car, the weight of the night's events still settled heavily on my shoulders. Just a short while ago, I had been standing in a police station, wrongfully detained, my wrists sore from the tight grip of handcuffs. Now, I found myself faced with a decision, one that would determine whether the officer who had put me through this ordeal would carry the consequences of his mistake on his record. I glanced toward Officer Davis, the man responsible for my arrest. He stood with his hands clasped in front of him, his expression steady, accepting. When I asked what would happen if I filed a complaint, the older officer explained. It would go on his record. Depending on the outcome of the investigation, there could be disciplinary action. Officer Davis didn't flinch. He didn't shift uncomfortably or try to talk me out of it. Instead, he simply nodded, his voice quiet but firm. I made a mistake, and I'll accept the consequences. His response caught me off guard. It would have been easy for him to become defensive, to justify his actions, to hide behind protocol. But he didn't. He owned his mistake completely. It was a rare thing to see, accountability without excuse. I let out a slow breath, weighing my anger against what I had just witnessed. I don't want to file a complaint, I decided finally. Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is how you handle them afterward. A flicker of relief crossed his face, but he quickly composed himself. Thank you, he said sincerely. But I still want to make this right. What happened next was even more unexpected. Instead of simply letting me find my own way home, Officer Davis offered to personally drive me back to my car. I hesitated for a moment, but something in his tone told me this was important to him, so I accepted. As we drove, the tension that had filled the air earlier had shifted into something quieter, more contemplative. After a few moments of silence, he spoke. I've been a cop for just under 2 years, he admitted. I grew up in a rough neighborhood. I saw firsthand what bad policing could do to a community. I became an officer because I wanted to be different. I wanted to make a difference. His words stayed with me. I had seen plenty of stories about officers who abused their power, who refused to acknowledge their mistakes. But here was a man who had been faced with his own failing and, instead of brushing it aside, was choosing to confront it. By the time we reached my car, whatever anger had lingered inside me had all but faded. As I reached for the door handle, he pulled a small card from his pocket and handed it to me. This has my name and badge number, he said. If you ever have any issues or questions, or if you change your mind about that complaint, you can reach me directly. I looked at the card for a moment, then met his eyes. Thank you, I said. As I drove home, I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had transpired. I had always held a neutral stance on law enforcement. I understood the difficulties of the job, but was also aware of the systemic issues that plagued it. This experience could have easily reinforced every negative perception I had. Instead, it had revealed something unexpected, a human side to the badge. Officer Davis had made a mistake, but what mattered was that he had recognized it, taken responsibility, and actively tried to make amends. It was a simple but powerful reminder that behind every uniform was a person, one capable of learning, growing, and striving to do better. I wasn't naive. I knew that one positive experience didn't erase the larger problems within law enforcement. But I also knew that real change, meaningful, lasting change, often started not with policies or regulations, but with individuals willing to hold themselves accountable. A week passed, and just as the incident had started to fade from the forefront of my mind, my phone rang with an unexpected call. It was the police department. They wanted to know if I would be willing to come in and speak with some of their officers in training about my experience. Apparently, Officer Davis had spoken to his superiors about what had happened, using it as an example of how not to handle a traffic stop. The department believed it could serve as a valuable lesson for new recruits. At first, I hesitated. Reliving that night wasn't exactly appealing. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that if my story could prevent even one person from going through what I did, then maybe it was worth it. So that morning, I found myself in a room full of young officers in training, standing before them and recounting my experience. I described the fear, the humiliation, the helplessness of being wrongfully detained. I told them how the initial interaction had made me feel like my words didn't matter. And then I told them about what changed that. To my surprise, they listened. Not just politely, but intently. They asked thoughtful questions, not defensive ones, about what could have been done differently, about how the situation could have been de-escalated earlier. There was a genuine desire to understand, to learn. Afterward, the training officer approached me. We can teach protocol all day long, he said. But hearing directly from citizens about their experiences, both good and bad. That's what really makes an impact. As I left the station, I was met once more by Officer Davis. He thanked me again, not just for not filing a complaint, but for being willing to share my perspective with the recruits. Your mistake turned into a teaching moment, I told him. That's a good thing. He nodded but hesitated before speaking again. I've been thinking a lot since that night, he admitted. I realized I've been approaching this job with too much fear. Fear of making mistakes, fear of not being respected, fear of the dangers out there. And that fear was making me rigid and defensive. I'm working on that now. His honesty caught me off guard. It was rare to hear someone in his position acknowledge their own weaknesses so openly. It was even rarer to see someone actively trying to change. We spoke for a few more minutes before parting ways, and as I walked to my car, I felt something I hadn't expected: hope. One conversation wouldn't fix everything. One training session wouldn't erase the deep-rooted issues within law enforcement. But change had to start somewhere. And maybe, just maybe, it started with moments like these, with individuals willing to admit their faults, to listen and to learn.